At my mother's funeral, my father didn't shed a single tear. He stood beside her coffin with his mistress, a woman half his age, wearing diamonds that used to belong to my mom. Then, in front of everyone, he handed her a leather folder, the deed to our $3 billion luxury ranch. Guests gasped. Cameras flashed. My knees trembled. But I smiled. He thought I'd be too broken to fight, that grief would silence me. But grief has a strange way of sharpening memory, and mine remembered every clause my mother ever wrote, every secret she whispered before she died. He believed he'd erased her legacy with one signature. He was wrong. Because when you hand a thief your fortune at a funeral, the only thing left to bury is your own name. And that day, I decided to show my father who the real heir truly was. The day of my mother's funeral felt unreal, like walking through a dream I couldn't wake from. The ranch was covered in white lilies, her favorite, their scent heavy in the warm Texas air. Reporters stood behind the fence, whispering about the Hamilton fortune, pretending they weren't waiting for a scandal. They didn't have to wait long. When I stepped beside the casket, my father, Richard Carter, wasn't looking at Mom's photo. He was looking at her, Vanessa Moore, 26, perfectly polished, standing close enough that their shoulders brushed. Her black dress looked more like a red carpet gown than mourning attire. "Your mother wanted peace," my father said, his tone cold as marble. "I'm sure she didn't mean this kind of peace," I whispered. Then, before the final hymn ended, he called for silence. The guests turned. He opened a slim briefcase, pulled out a brown leather folder, and handed it to Vanessa with a smile that made my stomach twist. "I want to honor Margaret by giving Vanessa what she helped me preserve, the Carter Ranch." Murmurs spread like fire. My breath caught. That ranch wasn't his to give, it was my mother's legacy, built from her family's inheritance. Vanessa pressed her hand dramatically to her heart. "Richard, I don't know what to say." I did. "You could start with thank you for stealing from the dead," I said, my voice cutting through the crowd like glass. Her smile froze. My father's jaw tightened. "Olivia, not here," he hissed. "No, exactly here," I shot back. "You think Mom can't hear this? You think this circus honors her?" For a moment, no one breathed. Then Vanessa smirked, leaning close enough for only me to hear. "Careful, sweetheart. You don't want to make enemies before you inherit nothing." I stared at her perfectly painted lips and laughed softly. "You've already inherited my father's lies. Let's see how long you can keep them." The priest cleared his throat awkwardly, urging everyone toward the gravesite. I stood beside the coffin as they lowered it into the earth. My father didn't look once. His hand was wrapped around Vanessa's waist, guiding her toward the waiting cameras. The moment the dirt hit the lid, a strange calm settled over me. Not grief, resolve. I could almost hear my mother's voice. "Silence is power, Olivia. Don't speak until you're ready to win." So I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled for the cameras just like Vanessa did, except mine wasn't the smile of a woman pretending to mourn. It was the smile of someone who already knew the next move. Because that ranch, it wasn't my father's gift to give. And before long, the world would know it too. When the last guest left and the funeral flowers began to wilt, I drove back to the ranch alone. The long dirt road shimmered in the late afternoon heat, cutting through pastures that had belonged to my mother's family for nearly a century. Every fence post, every barn beam carried her touch, not my father's. Inside the main house, the silence felt thick. My father and Vanessa had already moved into the master suite, their luggage still stacked in the hallway like they were claiming territory. I ignored it and went straight to my mother's study, the one room my father never entered. It still smelled like lavender and ink. Her desk was immaculate, except for one thing. A sealed envelope with my name in her handwriting. My throat tightened as I broke the wax seal. "If you're reading this," she'd written, "then I'm gone and your father has done exactly what I feared. But remember, Olivia, this land remembers who built it. The papers say Carter, but the soil says Hamilton. The truth is hidden where he'll never look, where work, not vanity, leaves its mark." I read that line 3 times before I understood. She was talking about the old stable, the one she'd renovated herself years ago. Outside, dusk settled over the valley, painting the sky in pink and gold. The stables creaked as I pushed open the heavy wooden doors. Dust floated in slanted beams of sunlight. I found the corner she used to sit in, sketching new paddock layouts. Under a loose floorboard, something glinted. A small metal box. Inside, a USB drive, a folded letter, and a copy of a trust document, Hamilton Family Holdings. My mother had transferred 70% of the ranch's ownership into a private trust, naming herself as sole trustee and me as successor. Not my father, not Vanessa. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the digital files on my laptop. Every deed, every transaction, every clause bore my mother's signature, and not one required my father's consent. He'd never noticed. He'd never cared to. When I closed the laptop, I looked out across the fields. The wind rustled the tall grass like a whisper. He thought he owned this land because he paid the bills. But ownership isn't money, it's memory. And my mother had buried her legacy deep enough that no amount of greed could dig it up. I whispered into the twilight. You were always 3 steps ahead, weren't you, Mom? For the first time that day, I smiled, not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that sees victory forming on the horizon. Because the moment my father signed that ranch away, he hadn't just betrayed my mother's memory. He'd triggered the very clause that would return everything to me. 2 days after the funeral, the ranch looked like a crime scene dressed for a magazine cover. Vanessa had wasted no time. The front gates gleamed with fresh gold lettering. The Carter estate, a new era. I parked my truck at the edge of the drive and watched luxury cars roll up one after another. Photographers, socialites, even a few journalists my father used to call leeches. They were here for her, his mistress turned queen. The woman herself stood on the grand staircase, all smiles and champagne. She looked radiant, in the way only people blind to guilt can look. My father hovered beside her, hand on her back, pretending the world hadn't just watched him disgrace my mother's memory. I should have left, but something in me, maybe defiance, maybe duty, pushed me forward. When I stepped inside, the crowd turned. The music faltered. Someone whispered, "That's his daughter." Vanessa's smile stiffened, but she didn't miss a beat. "Olivia! How wonderful you could join us. I know how much this place means to your family." Your family? The words tasted like poison. I wasn't aware we were celebrating, I said evenly, glancing around the room. Did I miss the part where my mother's name got removed from the foundation stone? Her eyes flashed. Oh, that old engraving? We're updating the branding. Modernization, you know. I walked past her, heels echoing on marble, stopping at the wall where my mother's portrait used to hang. In its place was a massive mirror trimmed in gold. My reflection stared back, tired eyes, black dress, jaw tight. That painting belonged here, I murmured. Vanessa tilted her head. Things change, darling. I turned to her slowly. Yes, but history doesn't, and this ranch has a long memory. The silence thickened. A few guests drifted toward the buffet, pretending not to listen. My father finally stepped in, voice hard but strained. Olivia, enough. This isn't the time. No, I said softly. You're right. It's not the time for me. It's the time for you to enjoy your new empire while it still feels real. I started toward the door, but paused beside Vanessa, close enough for her perfume to sting. Just one piece of advice, I whispered. When you live in someone else's house, don't get too comfortable rearranging the ghosts. Her smile faltered. Excuse me? You'll understand soon enough. I walked out into the night, the laughter behind me hollow and nervous. The sky was bruised purple, storm clouds gathering above the hills. I could smell the rain coming sharp, electric, inevitable. As thunder rolled in the distance, I looked back once at the glowing windows of the ranch my mother built. Vanessa thought she'd won. My father thought he'd buried my mother's legacy. But storms don't destroy what's rooted deep. They reveal what's been buried too long. And by morning, the reckoning would begin. The next morning, the sky hung low and gray, like it knew what was coming. I hadn't slept. My mind kept replaying my father's smug expression, Vanessa's hollow smile, and my mother's voice whispering, "You'll know when to fight." So I drove straight to Dallas to the law firm that handled my mother's estate. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "Miss Carter, Miss Blake has been expecting you." Eleanor Blake, my mother's attorney for over 20 years, greeted me with tired eyes and a cautious smile. "You look just like her," she said softly. "And I assume this visit isn't just for nostalgia." I handed her the USB and the trust papers I'd found in the stables. "She left this. She mentioned you in her note." And Eleanor adjusted her glasses, scanning the documents. Her expression shifted from curiosity to awe. "Good Lord, she really did it." "What?" "She created a conditional trust. Your mother restructured ownership 6 months before she passed. 70% of the ranch is in your name, but it's protected by an automatic clause. If your father ever tries to transfer ownership or gift the property for personal reasons, the entire estate reverts to you." I blinked. "You're saying," Eleanor smiled grimly, "by giving that ranch to his mistress, your father just signed away his rights. He triggered the clause." A strange mix of shock and satisfaction coursed through me. My father's arrogance had just buried him. "But there's more," Eleanor continued, pulling another file from her cabinet. "Margaret also recorded a video statement. It's sealed, but she instructed me to present it only if her husband violated the trust, which he has." She placed a small flash drive on the desk. The label read, "For my daughter when he betrays us." My throat tightened. "Can I?" "Not yet," Eleanor interrupted gently. "We'll need to present it officially. The trust activates through the probate court. We'll file the claim quietly. Let him think he's still in control." I exhaled slowly, the weight of what she said sinking in. "He has no idea, does he?" "Men like your father rarely do," she said. "They assume control means ownership, but your mother was smarter than any of them." When I stepped outside, rain had begun to fall steady and cold. I stood beneath it, letting it soak through my coat. Each drop felt like a baptism, washing away the helplessness I'd carried since the funeral. Back at the ranch, I saw workers unloading boxes of designer furniture, Vanessa's vision for her new empire. She waved at me from the porch, all sugar and venom. I smiled back, calm and deliberate. "Hope you're making yourself comfortable," I called. "It's not every day someone decorates a house they don't own." She laughed lightly, but her eyes flickered with unease. By the time I reached my truck, Eleanor's words echoed in my head like thunder. "He's already lost it all. He just doesn't know yet." By Friday, rumors had begun to spread, whispers traveling faster than the Texas wind. Some said my father was planning to marry Vanessa within the month. Others claimed he was selling pieces of the ranch to investors from Dubai. I didn't waste time correcting anyone. Let the stories run wild. The louder the noise, the quieter my move would be. I sat in my truck outside Carter Holdings, the glass headquarters in downtown Dallas, watching my father's reflection in the windows above. He'd built an empire on confidence, or what people mistook for it. Today, I was going to take that away. Inside, his assistant barely looked up. "He's in a meeting." "Not anymore," I said, walking past her and pushing open the double doors. My father stood by the window, phone in hand. Vanessa was perched on his desk, scrolling through something on her tablet. Her heels clicked against the mahogany like an impatient metronome. "Olivia," he sighed, not turning around. "You can't keep making a scene every time you don't get what you want." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what I was going to tell you." "End of it." Vanessa looked up, smirking. "Shouldn't you be grieving, dear?" "I am," I said flatly. "Just not for who you think." My father turned, eyes sharp. "What do you want?" "The truth," I replied. "Did you even read Mom's trust before you played Santa Claus at her funeral?" He stiffened. "Don't speak to me about that paperwork. It's irrelevant now." "Is it?" I stepped closer, pulling out a printed copy of the trust from my coat pocket. "Because from what I understand, you just violated Clause 7 amperes, no transfer of property for personal affection or gain. You didn't just gift Vanessa the ranch, Dad. You legally surrendered it." Vanessa's smirk vanished. "That's ridiculous." I dropped the document on his desk. "Ask your lawyers." My father's face went pale, the confident executive shrinking in front of me. "You don't understand the implications." "Oh, I do," I cut in. "You lost everything the second you tried to erase Mom, and the court will confirm it soon enough." For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the low hum of the city below filled the silence. Finally, Vanessa stood, clutching her purse. You think a few old papers make you powerful? Sweetheart, this world belongs to those who take. I smiled faintly. Then you'll hate what's coming next, because I'm taking it all back. I turned to leave, my father's voice following me down the hall, rough and desperate. Olivia, don't do this! I didn't look back. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of an incoming storm. The first drops hit my face as I climbed into my truck. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from adrenaline. He thought I was playing defense. He still didn't understand. I wasn't reacting. I was starting the war. The storm hit the night before the hearing. Rain hammered against the ranch windows like nature itself wanted to witness what was coming. I barely slept. Every flash of lightning reminded me of my mother's words. Silence is power. Speak only when the truth can't be ignored. By morning, the sky had cleared a deceptive calm. I arrived at the county courthouse early, dressed in a simple black suit that had belonged to my mother. Vanessa arrived in white, the color of denial hanging on my father's arm, as if she could charm the law itself. Cameras flashed. She smiled for every one of them. Inside, the air felt electric. My father's attorney, a gray-haired man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, shuffled through a stack of documents that already looked doomed. When the clerk announced Carter versus Carter, the room went silent. Judge Peterson looked up from his bench. Proceed. Eleanor Blake rose beside me, her voice calm but razor-sharp. Your Honor, this is not a dispute over ownership. It's the execution of a trust created and filed legally by Margaret Hamilton Carter 6 months before her death. She handed the clerk a sealed flash drive. Exhibit A, the late Mrs. Carter's recorded statement, to be viewed now per activation clause. The lights dimmed. On the projector screen, my mother appeared healthy, radiant, her eyes as fierce as I remembered. My breath caught. If you're watching this, she began, then Richard has made the mistake I feared most, trading legacy for ego. This ranch was born from Hamilton blood, built with Hamilton hands. And if my husband dares to give away what he never built, my daughter Olivia becomes sole heir and guardian of every acre. He forfeits all rights, legally, morally, and spiritually. The courtroom was silent, except for the soft hum of the speaker. My father's face drained of color. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, her diamond bracelet jingling like a warning bell. One more thing, my mother's voice continued. To my daughter, you were always meant to protect what's real. Don't fight with anger. Win with truth. The video ended. The silence that followed was deafening. The judge cleared his throat. Mrs. Blake, do you have evidence that the defendant transferred the property in question? Eleanor nodded. We do, Your Honor. Public footage from Mrs. Carter's funeral showing Mr. Carter presenting the deed to his mistress, Miss Moore, as a gift of appreciation. That act fulfills the violation clause in the trust. The projector flickered again, this time showing the moment that had burned into my memory. My father handing Vanessa the leather folder, cameras flashing, her fake tears glistening under the sundae. Whispers filled the room. Reporters typed furiously. My father's lawyer lowered his head in defeat. Your Honor, Eleanor said firmly, per the trust, ownership of the Hamilton Carter Ranch automatically transfers to Olivia Carter, effective immediately. The judge signed the papers with one deliberate motion. The sound of his pen might as well have been a gavel striking thunder. Vanessa shot up from her seat. This can't be happening. That's my home. No, I said softly, rising to face her. It was never yours. You can't steal what was never for sale. She glared at me, voice trembling. You think this makes you powerful? It makes me my mother's daughter, I said. My father finally spoke, voice hoarse. Olivia, please, we can fix this. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man he used to be buried beneath greed and guilt. You can't fix what you tried to bury, Dad. The bailiff handed me the official ownership documents. My hands didn't shake this time. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds as I stepped onto the courthouse steps. Reporters swarmed, microphones raised. I said only one thing before walking away. Legacy doesn't belong to those who take it, belongs to those who remember. And in that moment, I didn't just reclaim the ranch, I reclaimed my mother's name. And every piece of myself he thought he could sign away. By the time the court order hit the public record, The Carter empire began to crack like thin ice in spring. Investors pulled out within days. Partners demanded statements. And the same news anchors who once praised my father as Texas royalty now called him the man who lost a $3 billion ranch to his own daughter. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I just watched it unfold from my mother's study, the same place where she used to plan the future. Now, I was the one holding the pen. The first to vanish was Vanessa. She packed up her designer life overnight and slipped out before sunrise, leaving behind unpaid bills and a trail of tabloid headlines. Mistress of the Year becomes the face of public humiliation. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt pity, the hollow kind reserved for people who mistake greed for love. As for my father, he didn't run. He stayed. Maybe pride wouldn't let him, or maybe he couldn't face himself long enough to move. When I returned to the ranch that weekend, his car was still parked under the oak tree Mom planted on their wedding day. I found him in the stables, staring at the horses. He looked older, smaller, somehow. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened like a man who'd finally surrendered to gravity. "You came to gloat?" he asked without turning. "No," I said quietly. "I came to see what's left of you." He laughed bitterly. "What's left? A name dragged through the mud. A daughter who hates me." "I don't hate you," I replied. "Hate gives you too much space in my heart. You're just history." He turned then, eyes bloodshot. "I made mistakes, Olivia. But I built this legacy." "You built walls," I said. "Mom built the legacy. And when she realized you'd trade it for vanity, she built protection instead." He flinched like I'd hit him. "You sound just like her." "I hope so." The silence stretched. Only the horses breathed between us. For a second, I saw regret flicker in his eyes, a fragile thing too late to matter. "Do you know what it feels like?" he murmured. "To realize your daughter was smarter than you ever gave her credit for?" "Yes," I said softly. "It feels like justice." He looked away first. "What will you do now?" "Rebuild. Rebrand. Turn this place into something worth my mother's name again." He nodded slowly, defeated. "Then I guess it's yours now." "No," I said, heading for the door. "It always was." That night, I signed the documents transferring Carter Holdings into Hamilton Foundation for Environmental Renewal, a nonprofit dedicated to wildlife preservation and therapy programs. The empire my father used to dominate now bore my mother's maiden name, her values, her quiet strength. As the press called it a poetic reversal, I just called it balance. The king had fallen. The crown had returned home. And for the first time in years, the ranch felt alive again, not as an empire of ego, but as a kingdom of peace. 6 months later, the ranch didn't look like a battlefield anymore. It looked like home. The winter wind had softened into spring air, and the hills were blooming again, wildflowers pushing through the same soil that had once soaked up my mother's tears. The gates still bore the Carter name, but a new sign hung beneath it in wrought iron. Margaret's Meadow, a place for renewal. Every morning, I rose before dawn, brewed coffee in the same chipped mug my mother used, and walked out to the stables. The horses nickered softly when they heard my boots on the gravel. Their calm, steady rhythm reminded me that peace wasn't loud. It was quiet, earned, and deeply alive. Elena, the new operations manager I'd hired, joined me with a clipboard. "Therapy group arrives at 9, she said. "Veterinary teams doing checkups at noon." I nodded. "And the donations?" "Tripled this month." She smiled. "Your mom would be proud." I smiled back but didn't speak, because pride didn't begin to cover what I felt. Gratitude? Maybe. Redemption? Definitely. The house no longer echoed with emptiness. The portraits of my parents still hung in the hall, but now, my mother's stood at the center again, restored to her rightful place. The mirror Vanessa installed had been taken down, replaced with an old photograph. Mom on horseback, wind in her hair, laughing like she'd never known fear. Around noon, a black sedan pulled up. My father stepped out slowly, looking smaller, gentler somehow. He'd been living quietly in a nearby town since the scandal broke, stripped of his power, but not of his humanity. I met him halfway down the path. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "You look just like her," he said finally. "Every day a little more." "I know," I replied softly. He held out a letter worn, folded, and shaking slightly in his hand. I wrote this a dozen times. You don't have to read it. I needed to try. I took it but didn't open it. Some things are better said out loud. He nodded. I was wrong, Olivia. About everything. About love. About legacy. I thought I could control it. But legacy isn't control. It's what remains when control is gone. I looked toward the pastures, where children from the therapy program were brushing the horses. She taught me that, I said quietly, and I think you just learned it. He gave a sad, small smile. I guess I did. As he turned to leave, I called out, Dad. He paused. I forgive you, but that doesn't mean you get to come back. He nodded once. I know. Then he walked away, slow and heavy, until the car disappeared down the long gravel road. That evening, I stood by the fence, watching the sun bleed gold over the horizon. The land stretched wide and endless ours again, free of lies, rich with memory. I whispered to the wind, It's done, Mom. He can't hurt this place anymore. The horses stirred. The wind carried the scent of wild sage. And for the first time in years, I felt completely still. Revenge had ended. Justice had spoken. And peace, real, quiet, beautiful peace, finally came home.